Is the market ready for increased local manufacturing of medicines? My name is Dr. Ayodele Cole Benson. I'll be co-moderating this event this morning with Dr. Maria Sally. We have an agenda that I'll run quickly through. We'll have introduction, which I'm taking right away. After now, we will have Funke Falade taking the context setting, and we'll move straight into the panel session. After the panel session, directly after, we're going to be having the discussion, wrap up, and then closing remarks. So you're welcome. Just to give us an overview of why we're here this morning looking at this subject matter. The pharmaceutical industry in Nigeria is not just important but critical to our public health need and our overall economy as a nation. And this is addressing the healthcare needs of over 200 million people. Advancements been made here and there. Recently, Mr. President issued an executive order that was signed on the 28th of June 2024 to boost local manufacturing, local production of health-related commodities and medicines with the aim of improving health outcomes and the economy. However, the order mainly addresses upstream aspects of local manufacturing of medicines. Persistent systemic issues hinder the industry's ability to provide affordable, high-quality medicine to the last mile. So this is going to be looking at how to strengthen, increase production of medicine, quite all right. But we must also be able to look at optimizing the domestic market by improving supply chain management through better forecasting, procurement, and logistics to ensure the availability of locally produced, quality assured medicines and enhance equitable access to health care. So to give us the context, like I said earlier, will be Ms. Falade, who is a healthcare finance and investment professional, over 18 years of experience in management consulting, public health and healthcare infrastructure financing. She started her career with KPMG Nigeria, providing strategy, financial and project management advisory services to clients in the infrastructure space, government and healthcare sector. She has also worked on a series of USAID-funded health system strengthening projects. She led resource mobilization, strategic purchasing, and private sector engagement activities across 6 states in Nigeria, Ethiopia, Mali, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. At the NSIA, Ms. Falade explored opportunities to invest and catalyze medical manufacturing and industrialization in Nigeria. She holds a Bachelor of Pharmacy from University of Lagos, a Master's in Global Health Policy and Management from Brandeis University, and a Chartered Certified Accountant. So Ms. Falade will give us the context and our objectives this morning. One is to identify key policy strategies to boost local pharmaceutical production and reduce Nigerians' dependence on imports. We are also to examine ways of strengthening the pharmaceutical supply chain by enhancing transparency, accountability, and efficiency in procurement practices. The other key objective is to formulate policy recommendations as we end this session that will be aimed at regulatory reforms to address barriers, regulatory hurdles, high production costs, and logistical challenges. So we're going to be dimensioning in supply chain efficiency, regulatory frameworks, and local production capacity. So to give us more insight into that context, let's make welcome Ms. Falade, Funke Falade, to the podium. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you very much, Dr. Cole, for that very warm welcome. My sincere gratitude and appreciation to Dr. Saleh and Dr. Cole, the conveners of the Health Thematic Group within the NESG, for inviting me to be a participant of this very important session. Are the slides going to come up? Okay, so I should just go ahead speaking. Okay. So my here this morning is very simple. Really to just set the context to and provide a background of the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry in Nigeria. The distinguished panel members and also Dr. Abdul Mukhtar, who's going to wrap up this session, have the more difficult job of, discussing and reaching consensus on actions that we must take to harness the opportunities that we see. So I guess we can just jump right into it. And I think I think my slides are coming up, so that's perfect timing. So basically, when we talk about the size of the Nigeria sector, there are different figures that float around. Some say 4 billion, some say a little less than that, some say a little more than that. But I think that one thing that everybody agrees with is that it is a very vibrant industry in terms of pharmaceutical sales. It is second in sub-Saharan Africa, second only to South Africa. It is the largest market in West Africa and is actually makes up about more than 50% of the pharmaceutical sales within West Africa, right? But when you look at the dimensioning of the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry across medicines, across medical devices, and across vaccines, you see that most of the value coming from the sales, the healthy sales that we see, is exported, because we are producing about 30% of our medicines, we're producing none of our vaccines, and we're producing about 1% of the medical devices and the consumables that we use in country. So when you look at GDP reports, and I was just looking at the 2023 second quarter GDP report and looking at the contribution of manufacturing as a whole and pharmaceutical manufacturing to Nigeria's GDP, and you see that consistently over several years, pharmaceutical manufacturing has contributed less than 1% of the GDP. Just as a deep dive into the Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. So just to take a deep dive into the pharmaceutical manufacturing segment, it can be divided into upstream, midstream, and downstream. And when we look at the upstream segments, we see that things around clinical research and trials, drug discovery, drug formulations, innovative drug formulations, there's limited activity in that. We're seeing some activity in terms of clinical research and trials, and we think that that's gonna really increase over the next few years or so, because there is some agitation within the international environment about the representation of Africans in clinical research and trials. And also the government of Nigeria has come up with a very strong strategy for improving the clinical trial ecosystem. However, whether that will now dovetail into drug discovery is still something we don't know. know, and that's really going to be very dependent on whether we have domestic financing for preclinical research, because as we all know, whoever pays for the science dictates the priorities. When we look at the second part of the upstream segment, which is really around raw materials, provision of raw materials for pharmaceutical manufacturing, we've had an increase in activity from that. We've had 3 announcements, 2 relating to active pharmaceutical ingredients, 1 relating to excipients. One of the API factories is currently in construction. We're hoping that by the first half of next year, it will come on stream. We're seeing a very different model from comparator countries who have gone through this kind of reformatory arc, like India, Bangladesh, even China, much earlier. Because typically, when you look at the API and excipients market, what you see is that there is horizontal integration from the chemicals market into APIs and excipients. This is very different from what is happening in Nigeria, which is a vertical integration of pharmaceutical manufacturers who are now going backward into trying to secure their raw materials. However, when we think about the petrochemical activity that is going on in Nigeria, we have Eleme, we have Indorama, of course we have the Dangote refinery. We may see that we may start having a more vibrant chemicals industry that will, deconcentrate the risk for pharmaceutical manufacturers having to backward integrate into producing their own raw materials. So basically, just in summary, upstream, growing, very little activity, but growing, potential for huge growth. Now, when we look at midstream, which is manufacturing, wholesale, distribution, we see that it's a mixed bag. So for the older market where, we have traditionally produced simpler formulations, over-the-counter formulations, we're seeing a lot of competition, we're seeing price margins drop, and so we're seeing decline and exit of some of the older manufacturers from that market. And they are either moving into more complex formulations or they are moving into a contract manufacturing model in order to optimize their unit cost and to be able to take higher profits, when they sell. Unfortunately, most of that contract manufacturing is also being exported into Asia. And then the drugs are brought in here and are, packed and labeled and distributed. But what's interesting for midstream is really just the emergence of new complex formulations. So we're going into a lot more parenterals. We're going into things like RMNCH products, which we typically, we didn't venture into before. We're seeing things around assembly of medical devices. We're seeing people more interested in, medical consumables, apart from syringes and face masks. So there is some uptick in that. These, uncoordinated distributors, instead of spending most of their time on more value-adding activities like quality assurance for manufacturing, for the pharmaceutical manufacturers, is also bad news, because it means that margins, they probably take the lowest margins in terms of what the client actually buys and how much they are producing for. And also because they now have to contend with substandard and falsified drugs that are circulating and eroding into their own market share. For the client, of course, it's terrible news because there's price gouging, there's substandard and falsified drugs that we don't know where they're coming from, we don't know who's distributing, we can't track, we don't have the visibility. So overall, for downstream, there's really, some real work that has to be done in terms of streamlining that portion of the value chain. However, we still think that, my slides came up. Can we move to slide 3, I think? I think that's where I'm at. Thank you. One slide down. Yeah, okay. But I hope Dr. Skola and Sally, this presentation will be available to people, I hope, so that they can, digest it after this meeting. So, but we still think that there will be, sustained demand for pharmaceutical sales in Nigeria. It has been growing at a rate of about 9.1%. We still think that it will grow at that rate, possibly even higher. And there are certain things that are driving that. One is our population. We are 200 million plus. To be honest, I stopped counting after we passed the 200 million mark, but I'm sure when we get to the 250, I'll pay attention. I'll start paying more attention. So we're more than 200 million. We're growing at 2.3% per year. There's nothing to say that that growth is going to slow. So we're just going to have more people. And once we have more people, we're going to have more people who need medicines. Also, globally, the bad news is that health burden is increasing. Nigeria is no different. We're struggling with communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases are growing at a rate of 2% per annum. And what non-communicable diseases mean is that for most of the treatment regimens or the management regimens is that you will be on medicines for, over the life cycle, over the life course of people. And if we achieve our overall health goal of improving life expectancy, that means more people will need more medicines. Also, post-COVID, very robust conversations around regionalization of production of health commodities, health security. And we think that there's something that we can tap into. There are all sorts of regional initiatives that aim to provide some kind of technical assistance or incentives to help countries such as ours, to liberalize our pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. And lastly, foreign exchange issues, and we're not the only ones who have gone through a very huge devaluation of our local currencies post-COVID and post the inflation of the USD. But what that means for medicines is that medicines are increasingly, the branded medicine are increasingly becoming out of reach, and people are going to be relying on generic medications. Nigeria is a generics market, and Nigeria can potentially take or fill some of that gap that is being created by increasing or the decreasing affordability of branded drugs. Now, these are all just things that show that the demand for pharmaceutical sales will continue to increase. The real question is Nigeria going to step into the gap to provide most of those pharmaceutical sales? Is it going to be able to turn the 30%, say, to 50% or to 70% by 2030? So, there are challenges that we continue to experience within the pharmaceutical industry. Long-standing systemic challenges, just as Dr. Cole has said. Access to finance is an issue. Our infrastructure is, becoming rapidly dilapidated, not up to par. Even some of the GMP approved facilities that we have probably need a recertification, and will need a recertification over the next 2 years or 3 years or so. So there's a lot of capex investment that needs to go into those infrastructure to enable us to be able to produce the things that we need to produce. Also, we do have certain issues around regulatory. The throughput of regulatory processes often serve to hinder the pace of manufacturing in Nigeria. Finally, we have forex mismatch or USD Naira mismatch issues. So where we are dependent on imports for all our raw materials and we're receiving our revenues in Nigeria, it means our working capital needs is in USD, but we're receiving revenues in Nigeria, and we have to find a way to actually source, the working capital we need to buy our raw materials in USD. And I know that a couple of pharmaceutical manufacturers have said that they are now producing substantially below scale just because they're unable to meet with the working capital needs. So, we know these challenges, but I wanted us to also talk about the opportunities that we see. One of them, and of course I'm not holding brief for Dr. Mukta. I'm sure she's going to have a great conversation about what PVAC is doing and how it's doing it. But I think that the presidential initiative for unlocking the healthcare value chain really provides a unique opportunity to matchmake across global and local actors in different ways. One way is to matchmake finance and provide access to provide local operators with access to finance that they would traditionally not have been able to obtain, and at probably better rates than, you know, what they would get from the local market, or if they went by themselves. Another thing that PIVA can do is matchmake technical assistance to local operators, whether it's a quality issue, whether it's a technology transfer issue, whether it's an issue about just capacity building to be able to provide more complex formulations or do more complex things. And I think that this is really an opportunity that the pharmaceutical industry really needs to key on. The other thing I see is that, you know, there's been a lot of talk about WHO pre-qualification, being able to sell, you know, commodities to global, I'm rounding up, to global donors. But I think that there is an opportunity locally that we sometimes miss. And that is really just the opportunity for coordinated demand across different entities. One is the state drug management agencies. There's an opportunity, you know, for coordinating and pulling demand from the state DMAs to make sure that you are linking the manufacturers to those buyers. There's also the big, you know, there's the 300, 200 bed specialty, multi-specialty hospitals that are springing up in Lagos and Abuja. I know that there are a couple that are springing up in Lagos. There's one that is coming up in Nigeria, in Abuja. So there's an opportunity to pull demand from those kind of, you know, hospitals and link them directly to the manufacturer. And finally, at the federal level, I know there are ongoing discussions and, you know, strategizing about how, you know, we can coordinate and pull procurement together as much as possible to, you know, solve the problem of the fragmented distribution. The last thing I wanted to talk about in opportunities was really the executive order that Dr. Cole mentioned when he was giving his introduction. And yes, there is a tariff exemption. Yes, there is there's a VAT exemption. But I wanted to talk about that not really in terms of the exemptions, but just what that signals. The fact that the executive order was even signed. What it signals? What it signals is that for the first time in a very long time, as far as I can remember, the government is willing to listen. The government is willing to engage, and the government has, you know, understood that the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry can be a huge contributor to economic growth and stability. And I think that when I look at the arcs of countries like India, countries like Bangladesh, this is how they started. They started with first an acknowledgement of these three things, and then they went on and started to build. And I think that it would not be easy. It would not be a quick fix. I think we would need to dig our heels in and not just say it is going to be well, as we often do. We'll need to create the future we want. But I think that given all these things, you know, that we're seeing in terms of demand, in terms of government will, in terms of, you know, the opportunities that we can take, I think it will be well worth it for us to go on this journey. And with that, I end my session on the context of the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. And yeah, I hand over to Dr. Cole. Happy deliberations.
Thank you, Mrs. Faladay. So, Dr. Maria, take over.
I think you even delved into some of the solutions that we're going to explore today. So if we could just have Funke's, I think, third or fourth slide. on the screen. Yeah, the one about which divides the market into three. So this discussion, this panel really that we've pulled together today is moving away from production and moving down to the mid-market or midstream and more downstream. So looking at marketing, distribution, warehousing. The experts that we've invited today are going to delve into some of the solutions that would help move the products once they've been manufactured to the last mile. So we have some participants online. We have Mr. Raphael Ajayi. He's the head of supply chain at Fitson. He's a results-driven supply chain logistics manager, and he has a deep knowledge of managing supply chain operations, including procurement, warehousing, distribution, and inventory management. I don't know if he can switch on his camera briefly. And then second speaker or second panelist is Dr. Abiodun Oyenuga. He's senior manager and project lead, the BMGF strategic support to targeted Nigerian states to improve supply chain performance, and he works with the Africa Resource Center for Excellence in Supply Chain Management. Our third speaker, so Dr. Yenuga is a seasoned health systems expert and a specialist in healthcare quality improvement. He has over a decade experience delivering high-impact public health projects in low-resource settings, and his expertise includes logistics management, information systems, and public-private partnerships. Our third speaker, is it possible to project them if they're online? Yeah, our third speaker is Mr. Chukwudi Uche, and I'm going to invite him. He's in the room. Mr. Chukwudi Uche he's a chartered fellow of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, SIPS, United Kingdom. He's a procurement and supply chain leader, especially in the health sector. If you could join me here. He has hands-on experience and skills in all aspects of procurement and supply, including leading complex donor-funded procurement exercises, quantification exercises for health products, and he's also chaired the National Task Team on Malaria. He's developed several policies, guidelines, and procedure, and he was part of the team that conceptualized, planned, and implemented the Nigeria Supply Chain Integrated Project. His donor experience spans World Bank, USAID, DFID, EU, BMGF, and the Global Fund. Online, we have Mr. Kenny Otto. He's the head of supply chain at Royal Papworth Hospital Trust of the NHS. Mr. Otto is an accomplished international supply chain expert with substantial experience delivering supply chain services in Kenya, Ireland, UK, Uganda, Nigeria, Zambia, Tanzania, and South Sudan. Throughout his career, he's been instrumental to administering supply chain operations comprising plan, source, inbounds, inventory management, and last-mile deliveries. His expertise includes developing, implementing data-driven tech solutions for supply chain operations. And our first lady on the panel, Miss Mary Ame. She's Director, Warehousing and Distribution with Chemonics International here in Nigeria, the USAID, Global Health, Supply Chain, Procurement, and Supply Management Projects. Mary is an ardent pharmacist and public health supply chain expert with over 18 years of experience in public health supply chain management. She's currently director, as I mentioned, with Chemonics. Her work primarily focuses on public health, logistics, and supply chain management. I was saying earlier that she leads the largest supply chain operation, I don't know, maybe in the world or in Nigeria, to over 10,000 facilities every 2 months, public health facilities. She holds a bachelor in pharmacy and a master's in public health and an MBA from Universities of Jos and East London. All right, so we'll jump right in. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope our panelists online can hear us. May I invite Mr. Chukudi to come closer to us? Mr. Raphael Ajayi, can you hear us? Hello, Mr. Raphael Ajayi, are you there? All right, good morning. Thanks for joining us. So the first question goes to you. Could you articulate as a, well, from the manufacturer's side, managing supply chains for your medicines, what are the major regulatory hurdles hindering the expansion of local pharmaceutical products into the Nigerian market, and how can they be addressed?
You can hear us. So I can't hear anyone speak on the panel. The introduction was from Dr. Maria, but we can't hear anything else.
All right, so we can hear Kenny. Mr. Raphael Ajayi, can you hear me? Can you just confirm quickly?
Very well, I can hear you.
Oh,
now.
awesome. All right, so I'll take the question again. As a manufacturer, what are the major regulatory hurdles hindering the expansion of local pharmaceutical products into the Nigerian market, and how can they be addressed?
Okay, thank you. Looking at the major regulatory hurdles we face in this industry, I would like to start with maybe giving a kind of background as for the kind of industry where we operate. It is a known fact that almost like 99%, or if not more than that, of the input to our manufacturing, they are all imported. And because of this, we depend largely on imports. And to do that, we also need to have a kind of regulatory environment that can support even the local manufacturing of pharmaceutical products in Nigeria. So looking at starting from registration of a product, today, if you want to register new products, of course, from even what I've just heard, that what we produce locally in Nigeria today is more like about 30% of what we consume. So we still depend maybe 30 to 40, maybe we still depend on about 60 to 70 on, that has to be imported to the country. So looking at that, to register new products, we still have some challenges in this area. Yes, the quality shouldn't be compromised, but I think there's a need for us to accelerate the registration of new products, because if you don't have the approval to manufacture, you cannot go ahead. So that is very, very important. So the aspect of registration of new products should be looked into. Again, looking at the ports, we'll be talking about port congestion here and there. Before now, there's a congestion within the ports and even outside the ports. But thanks to our government, the one outside the ports, to a large extent, have been dealt with. But within the ports, there are still some issues there, some bottlenecks here and there. For instance, restricting a medicament to be cleared in a particular port. This does not really help us in the pharmaceutical industry. There are some ports that you cannot clear medicaments. And where we are restricted to, maybe you have just one scanner working there, infrastructure not adequate enough. You may have a situation whereby your consignment arrive at the port and you are waiting for scanner before they can be stepped down. You may have to wait for another 10 days or thereabouts. And if you look at the cost of holding these and so on and so forth, so it's actually making a lot of pharmaceutical manufacturing a bit difficult in Nigeria. Looking also at the high cost of funds, interest rates, and so on and so forth, because we largely depend, apart from even the API, the excipients, we largely depend on importation of even the machineries that will come, that we have to bring from outside the country, and so on and so forth. And so if we don't have good funding, it might be, this will be very, very difficult, and so on and so forth. So basically, these are the things that I feel that should be looked into. Then also, if you want to really help the local pharmaceutical company in Nigeria to, expand, at a higher rate, it's also important to mention the aspect of the product that we have sufficient capacity to manufacture locally. There is no point still, allowing some people to be importing even such products. A good example is infusion, like 100 mil. Of course, there is a ban on importation of 500 mil. If 500 mil can be banned, why? I don't see any reason why 100 mil cannot be banned. Because we have sufficient capacity, locally to make this product available to the entire Nigeria. From my head, I can count close about 7, companies in Nigeria that manufacture infusion. And oftentimes, they don't even know what to do with their idle capacity because the market there is saturated, particularly with some of these products. So it is important because if you allow parallel importation, this will also discourage people to invest or the local investor to invest more in expanding the lines of a product like water infusion. I think that is what I have to say concerning that. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Next, Dr. Abiodun Oyenuga. Can you hear me? Hello, Dr. Abiodun Oyenuga. Can you confirm that you can hear me? Are you? I think you've been unmuted, or maybe I don't know if it's the speaker. Okay, so maybe I'll move to the next question while we sort out that sound issue. So this is for Mr. Chukwudi Uche. You've been involved in supporting several states in Nigeria to improve their procurement systems. What are the biggest procurement inefficiencies that you've encountered in the course of your work? And what public sector procurement reforms do you think are required to improve the availability of medicines within the public sector?
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, everyone. In speaking to this question, I will start from what I will call the overarching challenge, which is the aspect of weak capacity of procuring organizations in Nigeria. And this is based on the work we've done so far. And as the moderator mentioned, we've had the privilege of working with a lot of states at the moment. And looking at a total of 8 states, we've been able to carry out what we call procurement diagnostic activities. And if we look at things from there and look at what we do in terms of global standard tailored to local reality, we look at high level 5 areas. So we look at how procurement is led, organized. We look at the aspect of strategy policies. We look at people, that is at the center of every improvement. We look at processes, and we look at performance management. And from these 5, we come to 23 dimensions. And from the 23 dimensions, we look at about 102 areas in procurement end-to-end. And in terms of our scoring, we score between 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest level of maturity and 5 being the highest level. And what we have seen, and this is also one of the things we want to disseminate to the country so that other states will see and learn from it. At the moment, looking at procurers from the Ministries of Health to the drug management agencies, what we are seeing is that we are at the level of 2. And looking at what we are discussing today with regards to the readiness of market, you see what this is speaking to. And procurement is a strategic value creator. And being at 2 means that everything we are doing is falling around ad hoc, tactical approach when it comes to procurement. And if I talk about it from layman perspective, it will be like a firefighting way of doing procurement. And just to help some of us looking at all the things we do within the 23 dimensions. Now, from how procurement is led up to the audit, because it's not just the procurement people that we look at everything. Now, I can pick 2 things. If we say best practices, procurement has to be strategically guided. And if we look at all the entities we've worked with, and I think by the time we look at all in Nigeria, you will find the same thing. There is none that you will see where you can find anything strategic. So you can't find any procurement strategy anywhere from what we have seen. And what that means is, whether we look at it from like at the national level to the states, it becomes a thing of concern that from leadership, guiding procurement up to the individual leading procurement in any procurement organization, that it will just be doing things as if you're doing firefighting. Whereas it's supposed to be in such a way that everything is strategically guided. And what we do is this, or what we advocate is that for every procurement organization, because it's a supporting function, you have to support the achievement of the overall strategy of the organization. Whether you look at it from the public or the private, like in Nigeria at the moment when we talk about renewed hope, we need to look at how is procurement contributing to that. Now, when we come to the DMS and you look at this is the strategy they have, procurement has to be very, very clear with regards to these, our strategic objectives, aligning to that. What that means is every other procurement activity end to end must be in line with it, with clear activities, targets, and how to measure it. You wouldn't see that anywhere. I will also bring out another one which is going to be helpful. If you look at the kind of supply chain we have in Nigeria, the challenges and what have you, and you look at the importance of risk management in a time like this, there is no single procurement organization you will go to within the public sector from what we have seen. And I believe the same thing will happen in others we have not seen, where you will say, where is your risk register? And you see anything. None. And whether we look at it from the manufacturing to those that are procuring, you imagine the kind of issue we're going to have. Like from upstream, for instance, we know all the kind of disruptions we have. And we are talking about health products that we need to look at continuous availability of those health products. It becomes a big challenge. Now, picking few issues when it comes to these inefficiencies and what are the mitigating actions. The first is the aspect of inadequate leadership support. That's the first. Whether we look at it at the national, at the state level. At the national, for instance, I'm very happy we have Dr. Mokhtar here. We need leaders working in health to be interested in what is happening in procurement, because we can't talk about availability, affordability, and access without that. And what that means is that support has to be there, up to who is leading procurement. Many a times we see support with regards to what some leaders want to get on the negative side. But what I'm talking about is that positive support, very critical. Now, we come to the aspect of professionalization of procurement, because every system we need to build, and I'm looking at things from strategic system strengthening, starts from beyond leadership, having the right procurement professionals. When we started our work in Nigeria, we did skills gap analysis, picking some people from the national and at the state level. And what we do is we grade them across different levels: operational, managerial, professional, and advanced professional. We didn't find any single person that fell within professional. And that was one of the reasons we saw the need to bring in qualification program in the work we do. Imagine a situation whereby we have like the DMS, we have the ministries of health, and we are talking about availability, affordability, and access, and we don't have procurement professionals. It becomes a challenge. And I'm not talking about those with certificates. We are talking about those with the right competencies. Like what we do in terms of best practice is that we don't just hire you because you have certificates. We have clear competency framework, and depending on what you want to do, we test you through skills gap analysis to see whether you fit in. Now, we need to have procurement professionals that have all it takes to drive health procurement in Nigeria. The next that is very, very important is the aspect of coordination, collaboration within stakeholders. But let me start from what we have seen internally. Procurement is not just for the people in health leading that. In any procurement organization like the DMS, you need to have procurement looked at from end to end, because there are some other issues that will help. Like we have those in finance, we have those in audit, we have those in admin, HR, because we can't talk about building the capability of procurement professionals without those in admin, HR that will need to ensure that. But we have seen a situation where that is not happening and leading to a lot of issues like payment challenges, which is a big thing I'm going to bring up. The other thing is the aspect of quantification being the basis for the procurement of health products. What we have seen so far is that that weakness is really very enormous, whether we look at it from the national to the states, especially with regards to essential medicines. The improvements we've had in the past, they have been around the key disease programs, malaria, HIV, TB, and maybe immunization. But essential medicine, we are scratching in that area. We want a situation where procurement is based on quantification leading to funding requirements, and this is where the manufacturers we benefit, because every engagement with them based on that will be in a very strategic manner. The other things are issues around payment. Is one big elephant in the room. We have Procurement Act that says if there is delay in payment, like after 60 days, there should be a penalty. But where have we seen that? We can't talk about readiness of the market with regards to increased manufacturing of health products with the kind of issues we are having today. A country where we are as Nigeria has to take this very, very serious. In fact, when we look at a situation where somebody is saying, no, we are following up to make sure you are paid, that shouldn't happen, because if suppliers are paid in a timely manner, you are not helping the supplier. You are helping the procurement entity first. And the reason is that because there's what we do, what we call supplier preferencing, which is how suppliers see us. So we look at it from the aspect of the value of what you're procuring and the level of attractiveness. Now, if you map this, what you will see is once the value is very high, attractiveness is low. And this is where government procuring entities, when it comes to medicines, fall in. When you are not paying, you are less attractive And because the value is high, you fall under, you can be exploited. So we have the exploitative quadrant, we have the nuisance quadrant, which is where value is low, attractiveness is low. Now we have the core, which is where we should be, and we have developing. But what happens is this: when we are not paying suppliers, and you know government procurement, the value, if you look at from the DMS, is large. So they look at it and say, okay, we can do business with you, but we exploit you. And this is one of the reasons why the cost of health products are very high. And I think government has to take this serious. So we have done a lot of work on this globally. And that is why you pick some laws now in developed countries. They're not just talking about payment. They're talking about publications to show that you are adhering to payment timelines. Because they believe that by doing that, it will translate to lower prices of medicines. Because suppliers will be able to give you supplies at better prices, which is very key when we talk about universal health coverage.
Sorry, we're running out of time. Yeah, it's quite interesting, but I have to, maybe 1 minute to wrap up.
Okay, so let me talk about, before I come to technology, things like framework contracts. This needs to be in our law. Like we have looked at some European countries, about 27 of them, plus European Free Trade Association countries, including UK, best practices in public procurement of medicines. Whereas they are doing open processes, more than a quarter of it is through framework contracts. Peak procurement laws we have in Nigeria, you wouldn't find this. That is very important for health procurement. Now, I talk about technology, which I like to bring last, because if you don't have the enabling system or processes, technology will likely fail. We need to also introduce technology, encourage technology when it comes to health procurement. And because of time, I will come to a few other things.
Yeah, maybe when we come round again. All right, thanks so much. Yeah, this is quite enlightening. I'll go back to, yeah, it was very enlightening. Dr. Abiodun Oyenuga, can you hear me? I hear you on my phone, but I don't hear you on the speaker. Check. Yeah, I hear you on my phone. Yeah, so check your speaker with, I don't know what's happening.
No, so if you hear me on your phone, then maybe it's something to
we
do
hear
with
you
the
now.
system there.
Yeah, we hear you.
All
Thanks
right.
so much.
Great.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah, so just you know, Mr. Chukudi gave us a very nice overview of procurement systems and the role of government in as being the largest off-takers to the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. I know your project has facilitated some relationships between manufacturers and states. So we're wondering now if you can tell us how these kinds of public-private partnerships can better be leveraged to optimize supplies of medicines.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And I believe we are actually at a crucial moment in Nigeria's healthcare landscape. The myriad of challenges we face, whether it's access to essential medicines or supply chain inefficiencies, can no longer be addressed by a single entity. And this is why RKSM, that's Africa Resource Center for Excellent Supply Chain Management, where I work, one of the key things that we'll try to do is to establish public-private partnerships in the work we do, because this obviously has become the game changer, right? Because the PPPs enable us to harness the strengths of both sectors, which is leveraging the private sector innovation and operational efficiency while utilizing the public sector's reach and regulatory power, right? So the public-private PPPs offer an incredible opportunity for us to address some of the efficiencies we see in the Nigerian supply chain. Currently, one key area where we see that becoming useful is the collaborative planning. So Chukwudi mentioned things around quantification, the confusion exercises that are gone in some of those states, which was which was non-existent before now. And so it was not easy for manufacturers or suppliers, so to say, to plan the demand. So there were so many issues around stockouts. Sometimes just so that they don't stock out, the reaction then is to overstock, and then they go into expiries. So these are some of the things that were driving efficiencies in that supply chain before now. But looking at the public-private partnerships and the collaborative planning opportunities that it brings, right? We see some of those efficiencies. Some of those indicators beginning to improve. Essentially making that supply chain more efficient. So by bringing together the expertise of the private sector, especially in logistics and innovation, right, and the regulatory and policy guidance from the public side, we can build strategies that are more effective in addressing the unique challenges of our healthcare supply chain system, right? The PPP also allows private sector to share infrastructure and resources. For example, private companies can bring their strengths in warehousing, transportation, and logistics management to support public health supply chain. And in return, the private sector benefits from government support in navigating regulations and gaining market access. So it's this kind of collaboration that streamlines the supply chain and ensures that medicines and health products get to where they're needed the most. And one of the results we've gotten from this is the recent policy supporting the pharmaceutical manufacturing in Nigeria, which obviously you see is encouraging more local manufacturing for dedicated commodities, essential commodities, as opposed to importing. Another advantage which we have leveraged is the PPP's potential in capacity building and training. Right, Chukwudi mentioned, clearly, there was that gap in supply chain professionals in the pharmaceutical sector, especially in the public sector. And so one of the things we've done is to provide technical expertise, right, through the private sector. We have a pool of experts that, that we leverage to provide this support to the states. And while we then ensure that the public sector ensures that these training programs reach professionals across the states, especially in the underserved areas. This we expect will raise the overall efficiency and capability of the workforce. Policy reform and advocacy is something that will ensure that the PPP will play a very active role in, because both sectors will benefit more from streamlined and efficient regulation. So, working together to push these reforms that simplify procurement processes will also improve compliance and promote best practices in supply chain management. Of course, with the private sector's agility and the public sector's mandates, we can create an enabling environment for the entire ecosystem. Finally, technology. Technology is very crucial, and there's no gainsaying that the PPPs are the perfect vehicle for driving technology adoption and innovation. We have several private sector companies that are already investing in advanced tools like blockchain for traceability, artificial intelligence for demand forecasting. The Internet of Things is becoming real, these days, for real-time monitoring. And so we believe that working with governments, we can integrate these technologies into the public health supply chain, which will ultimately improve transparency, reduces stockouts, and of course, cut out inefficiencies. Ultimately, what we then aim to do is to see how we can ensure that end-to-end visibility in the public health supply chain, which will ultimately, drive up that efficiency that we're looking at. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. So next is Mary. He mentioned private sector investment in warehousing and distribution. You've been running a very large program. What are some of the logistical challenges you've encountered, especially those delivering commodities to rural and underserved areas, seeing as those ones are not quite as attractive to the private sector?
Okay, thanks, moderator. Majorly, I think the major challenge we have that I have experienced based on my work thus far is the inadequate infrastructure across board to ensure efficient supply chain operations. And by that I mean looking at, first of all, the warehousing. If we look at the warehousing infrastructure across the tiers, especially at the lower level, we'd find out that we hardly would get pharma-compliant storage facilities at that lower level to ensure that we're able to maintain these products, maintain the product integrity along the supply chain until it gets to the end user. And then transportation also is another challenge, given the fact that we have pharmaceuticals that we have to move require stringent conditions, and by that getting facilities that will be able to convey these products from one point to the other, especially getting to the last mile in a pharma-compliant manner, is usually a challenge, especially where it even has to do with cold chain products. That is one major challenge we face at that last mile. Even though with the kind of system that we operate, we've tried to work around these, use innovative solutions to ensure that we're able to get these products to the last mile, leveraging on other options that could help ensure the integrity of this product to the point that it gets to the service delivery points. Also looking at the infrastructure, road network also at that lower level is a major challenge. The road networks, especially when we start getting to the hinterlands, some of these localities are very difficult to access. Roads may have been cut off, especially during rainy seasons like this. You would find a number of roads, bridges washed off and all of that. So getting products to these locations usually will be very challenging based on the difficult terrains we have in country at those lower levels, those last mile levels. And then these speak to the infrastructure inefficiencies. One other thing would also I have experienced looking at how it impacts supply chain operations is data quality. You know, sometimes not just data quality, even inadequate data to help inform demand forecasting, you know, and then help ensure that we get the right quantities to the last mile. So where quality of data at the health facilities is poor, possibly due to inadequate capacities of the health facility personnel, there's every likelihood that the data that comes up will not be adequate or will be poor, and so would not inform the right resupply to these facilities. And then we may have situations whereby we would have overstock at those levels or even understock at that level. And all of these impact efficiencies. Where we have overstock, there's every likelihood that commodities may end up getting wasted at that level. And where we have understock, end users are not able to access commodities when they need them, and therefore defeats the aim of ensuring accessibility to life-saving products at the last mile. So ensuring that we're able to have visibility into the system, especially at the last mile, and ensuring quality of data from these points so that they feed up accurately is very key to help in demand planning and then in resupply. One other challenge which we all can relate to that we've experienced at this point is security concerns. Security concerns at these levels, there are some localities that accessing them is a challenge due to the security breach at those locations. And so we continue to work with the stakeholders to devise alternate means to getting these commodities to the last mile. And where we do or find out that we cannot get to that point, A number of times we're forced to have to maybe put at a particular location or a hub where one could consider safe enough to house these products, and then later on find ways of conveying this down to the locality, so that the end users can have this. Another challenge, which I may not say it's directly directly impacts the availability of this product at the last mile, but it indirectly impacts. However, it plays a major role is the regulatory hurdles we face sometimes at the port when we need to clear these products and have them available. We apply the just-in-time principles so that we minimize the length of time that products get to stay in the warehouse and all of that. However, the bureaucracies at the port sometimes extend these delays, and so we're not able to get this. So these are some of the challenges that we face. One more thing is the heavy reliance on external funding, donor funding, I would say, particularly by the public sector. This is a major challenge to the public health supply chain system, where financing of the system, if once it's possible within the system, would find out that the system will be more sustainable and more resilient to impacts in the environment. I think I'll just stop at this point and we can take the rest later.
Thanks, Mary. So just taking up your last point with Kenny. Kenny, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Awesome. I can hear you loud and clear.
All right. So I'll jump ahead a bit. Would you say, based on your experience, that logistics, warehousing business, just to reduce the reliance on donors, would you say the logistics business it can be considered a bankable business, especially in a pharmaceutical supply chain? And can you tell us what kind of investments are required? Maybe a bit also about use of technology.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Maria, and I'm actually quite excited to be on the call. I haven't worked with majority of the panelists. Yeah, to your question, it is absolutely bankable to have logistics is bankable in improving the supply chain activities for local manufacturers. I haven't worked with the manufacturers if it's in the capacity building for government. One of the things I've seen from working in Nigeria is the issue with access to transparent funding. Funding from, as an investor, what I want to be able to attest to is the data availability, data credibility, and data accuracy. What's the current market value in Nigeria? What's the current market size? What's the infrastructure limitations that we have? As an investor, it is a critical part that before I can make an investment, that needs to be very clear to me. I recently am working with some pharmaceutical investors from the UK that are invested in Nigeria, but access to data has become a very, very non-available. Dr. Funke did mention some numbers, but those numbers are not verifiable due to the lack of transparency, accountability, and visibility into the supply chain. And this brings me to the point around the logistics part of it. From a logistics standpoint, you I agree that we have a very challenging infrastructure in Nigeria. One, from a road network perspective, people that have the right trucks, the right equipment would not want to invest in the Nigerian pharmaceutical.
It's frozen. Okay, so I think we are really, really short on time. We need to allow some time for Dr. Abdul to discuss some of the points that have been raised today. So I'll just probably ask you all one more question. If you can give me a response in 1 minute. What policy... Sorry, Kenny, your internet has gone off or is crackling. Could you mute at the back? Yeah, it's crackling. Just mute it until it's better. Yeah, could you all maybe give us one policy recommendation, especially around investment in, your particular sector? So, for example, Mr. Raphael Ajayi, can you speak about your own investment priorities and how government can support? So these are some of the things that the NESG can take up in the next year. I know a lot of emphasis has been on production, but we are hearing there are challenges also with the supply chain, getting these products to the last mile. So I'll start with Mr. Raphael Ajayi. Just 1 minute, please. What kind of investments would you say are now critical to move these products from your factories to the last mile?
Thank you. Talking about this is outbound logistics now. Even though I would have loved to speak more regarding how we can reduce our reliance on imports of pharmaceutical products. But not a problem. It's important to just mention this, that there are 3 key aspects we need to look at in terms of availability of availability of pharmaceutical products in Nigeria. The raw material aspects, the packaging material aspects, and also the equipment aspects. That is very important. In India today, for instance, India can boldly say that from beginning to the end, if you manufacture a product like paracetamol, that from beginning to the end, everything that has to do with the input is from India, starting from the glass bottle to the API that is used, up to 3, 4, 5, up to 3 other 5 excipients, and every other thing to the packaging, to the machinery that they even use to manufacture the product. Everything they can say from India, but that cannot be said concerning Nigeria today. So if you really want to boost local manufacturing, there's a need to really look into this area. Governments should come up with policies that can support manufacturing, APIs, equipment, and even those who are manufacturing packaging material in Nigeria. They still depend on importation of papers. What is happening to our paper mill, and so on and so forth. That is very, very important. Then coming to the outbound, it's important to also ensure that there is some infrastructural development in terms of road network. As it is in Nigeria today, if you want to transport your product from Nigeria, from Lagos to a place like Kano or Maiduguri, it might be taking close about 4 to 5 days. And ideally, it shouldn't be. We're talking about essential products, life-saving products. So there's a need for the government to, quickly improve our road infrastructure, and also all the major multiple taxis on the road. Each state come up with their own taxis here and there for the logistics companies that helps to move all these products. this is important to look at this. I would strongly want to recommend if the whole nation as in Nigeria can harmonize all these taxes so that whatever that happens in one state can also be applicable in the other states. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think your last point, I think it's been addressed. I've heard it been mentioned a few times, harmonizing the taxation, especially for logistics. I'll go to Dr. Abiodun now. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can. Can you hear
All
me?
right. So now in terms of financing procurement from the states, insurance, a larger coverage of insurance, I think would be one of the key factors that would help finance a sustainable health supply system. Can you discuss your experience from the states where you've worked in terms of the states being able to pay back within the stipulated timelines as mentioned by Mr. Chukudi earlier?
Thank you very much. So I think that, before we even go into how they're able to finance, supplies, it's critical for us to first identify that the coverage of health insurance in Nigeria is really very low, right? So I can tell you confidently that most of the states are not financing their public health supply chain through the health insurance scheme, at least not yet, right? What we've seen is, for the states where we work, the governor now, being a critical stakeholder and also with interest in ensuring that there's that access to affordable, quality, essential medicines, are going ahead to invest, so there's some sort of what we call a buffer fund, right, that they put in place. And so one of the things that we've done in the PPP is to negotiate for, some sort of period, during which the DMEs, try to make some sales and hopefully are then able to pay. The reason why we advocated for the buffer funds is so that, just like Chukudi mentioned, to ensure that they're able to pay their suppliers on time, right? So if for some reason they are not able to completely sell off the stock, they have some of that fund that they can leverage, to make up that payment, and in that way, it sustains the interest of, the private, the local manufacturers that they work with. And I would say that, Mr. Ajayi is in the room, Mr. Raphael from Fitsin, who's been, Fitsin was one of the first companies who really quickly settled and supported this PPP. And he would attest to it that we had that initial challenge, with states being able to be, but as soon as, we began to infuse some of those technical competencies in terms of managing supply chains, and then of course, making available budgeting, quantifying, doing forecasting and demand planning. So some of them are then able to pick up, and then they are paying more regularly, even before the agreed timelines or on their MOUs. So if we must see the kind of gains that we expect to see from the health insurance scheme being able to finance a sustainable health supply chain ecosystem in Nigeria, I would strongly advocate that there's a push from the regulators to expand the net. The more people that we have in the pool, the more we're able to then, take out some of that fund to increase, the demand for healthcare. The more people in the pool, there's an increase in the demand for healthcare services. The healthcare facilities and the insurance scheme state now have more money, and then they can always do, it puts them in a better place to even negotiate better with suppliers, because now the demand is larger, and then they can get lower pricing, which is one of the things that we've also seen in the states that we work with, So that for me, I think will be the one thing that I would really want to advocate for, that we see how we ensure that there's a wider uptake of health insurance across the country. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Mary, so can you share, just in a minute, can you share or can you recommend some options for financing a strengthened warehousing and distribution network?
Thank you, Maria. So again, it still comes back to the public-private partnerships. That's very, very key for strengthened warehousing and distribution infrastructure. As having, and with this, of course, you're able to leverage on the funding, at least from the private sector, to help develop the infrastructures that are required. And at the same time, for the operations, you're able to leverage on the private sector expertise while harnessing the strength of both parties to run a seamless and efficient warehousing and distribution system. So that's very key. Another thing is attracting local investors, like encourage local investors to look into investing in the logistics stream. This is very key. Not many people know that for the public health supply chain system, that there is a market there. The market is huge, and we find out that once a typical logistics company is only looking at ambient requirements, that is regular requirements for moving regular goods and services, goods or products. But for pharma, there is a huge market there, which once local investors are able to invest in this space and awareness is created across the system, and the government regulations also are able to implement policies to ensure these kind of protocols are adhered to, or these kind of requirements are adhered to for pharma distribution, we would find out that both the invest from the local investor and the demand from the market would meet, and it would be a robust economic system. So that's one piece. And then once local investors are encouraged to invest in this regard, one other thing the government can try to do is also give them maybe stuff like, say, tax breaks or thereabouts, or some form of subsidies for providing those kind of investments, since this is a sector that requires more attention, more dedicated attention, in order to ensure that we get products in their right quality and condition to the last mile. Eventually, all of these boils back to what the end user is consuming, and until the end user is able to get the product in its right quality, we cannot guarantee the life of the end user at that point. So I think I'll just stop here. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Mr. Chukwudi, in 1 minute, you were speaking about capacity building. I don't know if you wanted to wrap up your thoughts. You said you were going to speak a bit. We spoke about human capacity. What other capacity can also be built in terms of like system, etc.?
Thank you. So, looking at capacity, one key thing and the takeaway from here is that in terms of procurement within health, it has to be done by those qualified to do that. I am primarily a pharmacist, but that doesn't make me a health procurement professional. We need people with the right attitude, skills, and knowledge to lead health procurement, and that is when we can have the right system to drive health procurement. The other thing that is very, very important is the aspect of data. This is where we need to build capability. From the work we have done so far in all these states, and similar we can see in other states, is that there is no place you will see what we call spend analysis in procurement. And what that means is that you will never achieve strategic procurement, and I repeat, you will never, without instituting that. And that's one challenge we have in the country we need to deal with. And that is why we need to have qualified procurement professionals. The other aspect in terms of capacity is quality, because we are talking about health procurement, quality first. What we have seen working with the DMS, and this is very, very important to the government of Nigeria, is that as we have these laws, setting up DMS, doing that huge level of procurement, we have not also seen the right level of quality system. And we know that before any other thing in supply chain, like warehousing, distribution, and what have you, if we don't get it right through procurement, we'll be in trouble. We want a situation where the basic screening that can be done as we are receiving these health products are in place, linked to the National Regulatory Agency, NAFDAC. That is when we can be sure of what we are taking when it comes to health products. The other aspect is funding, which has to be tied to the payment I talked about before. And lastly, because of our time, I talked about framework agreements. I said when I started that through the work we have done, we are at the level of ad hoc tactical. And there are some certain things we are doing today we think we are getting benefits out of it that wouldn't be sustainable. And like we are using MOUs today. These things from best practice over time will not be the best approach. If we have an opportunity for review, there will be need for provision where we have framework agreements. We are able to have long-term agreements that can be the basis for the kind of dynamic purchasing we can have in health procurement, because having repeated tendering for health products will lead to stock out, especially when you look at what we see from what we call category market positioning. So it's very, very important we look at that as a country.
All right, thanks so much. I think we'll wrap up here. We're behind almost 20 minutes, and there's still a session with Dr. Abdu. So I'll want to thank our panelists very much, Mr. Chukwudi, for your very enthusiastic. I think we got a procurement lecture today. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary, Kenny, Dr. Abiodun, and Mr. Raphael Ajayi. Thank you so much. So I'll call on my colleague, who is thematic lead for Health as a Business, HPC, to come and have a quick discussion with Dr. Abdu. If you need assistance, I may read out some of the points that I've captured, but I think I saw you taking notes. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. I hope we have been having a nice time so far. Well-informed session. Thank you for that. So permit me again to welcome Dr. Abdul Mukhtar, please. By way of introduction, sir, I would want you to do that introduction yourself. I remember when we had a meeting, you gave a very good overview of what you do at PVAC, just for the benefit of the audience, sir. Thank you.
No, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm not going to talk too much. I know we're running out of time, but I want to recognize a number of partners that have been supporting our work. I see His Excellency, the EU Ambassador. Oh, Belgium Ambassador, yeah, EU, Belgium, it's the same, right? No, okay, so you're welcome. And I see Dave, from FCDO, thank you for all the support that you're giving. And I see a lot of important partners as well. I think Funke has really made a very solid case and laid out the topic for today. The presidential initiative for unlocking the healthcare value chain, which I head as a national coordinator, is an initiative that was established by the President of Nigeria in October of last year. And the idea is, when you look at the healthcare agenda for this country, is anchored as anytime you listen to Dr. Pati, the Minister of Health, he talks about these 4 pillars. So the unlocking healthcare value chain is the 3rd pillar of the healthcare strategy. So everything is really connected. And the goal, the President gave us 3 very clear KPIs. The first one is to increase the share of locally produced health products. So that's the KPI number one. Funke has again laid out what the numbers are, so we have a very clear agenda and plan to basically revise these numbers, and we have a 2030 plan that we've developed to be able to revise that. And that's the first target. The second target is to reduce outbound medical tourism. In Nigeria, we spend $1 to $2 billion every year in outbound medical tourism. So how do we build the quality health infrastructure, whether in terms of hospitals or diagnostic facilities, to be able to address that? The third is really to create jobs. Job creation is really important. So along each part of the value chain, how do you create jobs? How do you mobilize resources, both internally and externally? Finally, I think what is really interesting or unique about this initiative is at super ministerial level. So when you're talking manufacturing, for example, you have Ministry of Trade, you have Ministry of Health, or whatever the sector department. This initiative is at the presidential level. So we report to the president, but we have several ministers. So everybody who has to be around the table for all these discussions are actually part of this new initiative. So PVAC, and I see many of my colleagues here, part of the team, we provide in the secretariat. So you have the ministers of health, trade and industry, finance, budget and planning, digital and ICT, but you also have NAFDAC, the regulator, you have the Standard Organization of Nigeria, and I hear talking about standards and quality. You have financing institutions like the Bank of Industry, the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, representations from the private sector, very important. So really, the idea is whenever any issues are being discussed around local manufacturing, everybody's around the table, and the president chairs this initiative. He's delegated his power to the Honorable Minister of Health to lead.
All right, thank you so much. Just to give some background of what Dr. Abdul Mukhtar does with at PVAC, and that's why I wanted him to give that general overview. As it is today, our key objective is to walk away from this session with some key policy recommendations that we should be able to work on after now or pursue as a nation. So I'm going to be asking from Dr. Abdul Mukhtar's perspective now, what are the things you think we should do differently? You've heard of the hurdles, and those are very clear, and we don't need to repeat them, but we now need solutions from the good office that you occupy, really, and trying to unlock this sector as well. What are key policy recommendations that you want to give to us, sir?
Look, thank you. I think the panelists have done an excellent job in really laying out the challenges and even suggesting some recommendations. So I think before I go into things that need to happen, anytime you think about this topic, I want you to think about 4 questions in your mind that you need to carry about. So the first question is, why is local manufacturing important in the first place? Why are we doing this? It's just not just a cliche, everybody wants to manufacture, so why are we doing that? And I think that the answer is, as a country, 230 million people, you need to have at least a minimal level of security of your health products. We saw what COVID did to many countries, and I was overseeing a similar assignment at a continental level in my previous job, and I saw what really happened with many countries that were not really prepared to have that minimal security. So to be clear, we are not trying to substitute for imports to make sure that to say, okay, no, we are not importing any products. That's not the game. The game is really to say, what are the essential products? How do we produce them locally? So that's the first question. I think that's really important. The second question that people should ask is, how do we then produce competitively? We know all the challenges that have been highlighted. If you have poor infrastructure, you have all these challenges. It does not, when you think about producers, and this is basic economics, you also have to think about the consumers. So you are not really you don't want to produce goods because you are producing locally and have your citizens buying those products at a higher cost because they're just locally produced. So you need to be able to produce. How do you become competitive? How do you produce cheaper products? But also, how do you produce products that are also of the same level of quality that you can find anywhere. Because everywhere I go, and I'm going to repeat it today, I'm sounding like a broken record. Local production in Nigeria or in anywhere in Africa does not and should not mean poor quality products. You know, our citizens, people, Nigerian people, everywhere, people across the world, they deserve the best quality products, especially healthcare products. So that's very important. The third question is then, how do you build, that people should be thinking about, how do you build an ecosystem? Because really you need an ecosystem approach. An ecosystem approach really meaning all the different pieces, you know, the value chain. That's why we're looking at this as a value chain issue. You know, so what are the policies that you need to put in place? And I'm coming to address that specifically. You know, what kind of financing do you need? You know, how do you build the market? How do you ensure market access? How do you provide, you know, the research and development capability that you need to build into that? So regulations. How do you strengthen regulations? So everything is really all interlinked. You cannot have just one piece and not the other. So policy is very important, and so that's the last question. So in terms of policies, you look, a lot of things are already happening, and I'll just highlight a few things. You know, we talk too much about the executive order, but it's really key. If you're really encouraging people to produce locally, it doesn't make sense then when they import the machinery and the raw material that they need to make this local production, then you charge them high taxation and so on. So specifically, the executive order calls for zero VAT, zero duty for equipment and raw materials for the production of these products. So that's really number one. Now, where we are in terms of policy is implementation. You know, you can always you can make as many policies, and there are so many policies in this country. You know, the real issue is how do you execute? So with the executive order, the president has also tasked us to develop a framework for implementation, which we've been working on, which we've concluded. And that framework involved discussing with customs, discussing with FIRS, because, you know, you will have, everybody is talking. FIRS will say, well, you know, this is taking tax. If you zero tax, so that's a problem to the national economy. You know, so customs will say the same thing. You know, so involving, working with them, we've actually developed a framework that everybody is happy with that is going to be implemented. This week, the Attorney General is going to publish the Gazette. The executive order is finalized. It's coming out this week from the government press. So that's really, that means it's codified. It's going to be effective immediately. So that's number one. Now, other things that you need to do. Basics, procurement. Chukudi, talk about procurement, very important. Now, again, if you look at the executive order, page 4, section 3, first paragraph, there's actually, it starts with saying framework contracts. So that order is also providing room for market shaping activities, because I think it's very important. You know, you need to shape the market because the procurement is very disaggregated, federal, state, private. You know, so we are creating market shaping mechanisms, including framework contracts. It's actually there. That includes pool procurement. It's already there. But most importantly, and I'm giving a preview to all of you in this room, is that we are in the process of designing a platform using PPPs to basically be the platform for the procurement of all of healthcare products. The president has given us a go-ahead. We're designing this. It's going to be it's worked in some parts of the world, but we're bringing it to Nigeria, where basically it's one platform. It's not an agency or anything. It's just really a platform that will bring everybody together, the federal government, the states, MPSCDA, health insurance agency, you know, that, you know, can aggregate, but on the other hand, also just with the manufacturers, the suppliers, and creating all of this using very powerful technology tools to do that. It's already in process. It's not rocket science, and it's going to change the game. So that's another policy thing that we're doing. Funding, yes, is a key issue in terms of, you know, how do you provide the right funding, right? We are mobilizing funding. So one of the things that PVAC is doing is really just, you know, talking to different manufacturers. So we also created this group called the Pharmaceutical Consultative Forum, where every quarter we meet with the pharma industry. So that's why when we talk, we seem to know what we are doing, but it's not really our own ideas. It's ideas from the industry, because we talk to the industry on a constant basis. The minister engages. We went to Lagos twice. We went to Kano once. Bring all the different manufacturers, listen to them. What do they want? All these issues. They tell us these things, and so based on what they tell us, that's how we're designing our own solutions. So one of the things that they tell us is all this, the whole lack of, pool procurement and all of that, and we're listening to them and we're doing that. But the other thing is financing. What financing works? When you talk to some of the big financing agencies, they have money in the hundreds of millions. Many of these companies, especially the local ones, they need small financing, SME-based financing. So how do we create flexible instruments? So we've been talking to different financing agencies. We've been talking to Afrexim Bank. We signed a $1 billion facility with them that is flexible, debt, equity, guarantees, but also high-end, big tickets, small tickets. We're talking to the European Investment Bank to design similar instruments, Africa Development Bank, so similar things like that. For organizations that need even equity finance, we're talking to private equity funds that do specific healthcare. So really just flexibility. And I hear exchange rate, so we're also looking to see how do we do local currency financing as opposed to, foreign currency financing, just to hedge for currency risk. So that's one area what we're talking about. I know you want me to stop now, but very important, quantification, Chukudi, you raise this, is really important. But let me tell you something, help is on the way. At PVAC, we just finished detailed quantification and focusing of SRH products and MCH products, maternal child health products, sexual reproductive health products, about 14 products, detailed to the single tablet. We have that data, and we're building that. We're building across multiple, now we move into nutritional products. So if you come to us, we know, you can just tell us a product, MCH product, or SRH products among those 14. We'll tell you what the focus is, and I assume we'll deal it for the next, multiple, the next year, 5 years, 20 years, of course, focusing beyond that, can be tricky. But we have that information, but I think it's really important to also provide that accurate information. So things are happening, good things are happening. And finally, some of the other good things that are happening, clinical trials. Somebody talk about clinical trials. When we talk about many of the manufacturers, one of the things that they want to do, clinical trials. And, some of these, you cannot be doing clinical trial for Lassa fever anywhere else in the world but Nigeria. Lassa is a local government here, I think in Nasarawa or Plateau State. So these basic things, why are we not doing it here? They have the population, and many of these, you need diverse populations, you need the genetic pools that make sense for whatever you're doing. So we've done a business case that we just concluded with a organization called Purpose Africa that does these kind of things. And we are projecting to establish 435 clinical trial centers in Nigeria that we've already identified, scoped. It's going to cost about $770 million US to do completely to get to that point by 2028. But what is interesting is the revenue that can potentially be generated from that and the number of jobs. So in terms of revenue, we're projecting to raise about $3.8 billion into the country from that, the clinical trial activity that we are having. And we're talking to the CROs. So we're not just doing this because we just want to build so that they can come later. No, we're talking to already the people who are demanding to have these centers established. So 3.8 billion, you invest 770, that's one for each dollar that you invest, and you potentially raising $5 million. Last week, the minister and I were in Ede, in Osun State, where we launched a huge genomics center, International Center for Genomics. Professor Christian Happy, one of the world-renowned experts in genomics, they had like the whole global people there, including people like Francis Collins, who led the Human Genome Project in the US and was head of NIH. They were all there. We had very intense discussions about how Nigeria can actually become a center, building around that. The center is already open, but how do you? I think it's my cue to stop because they shut me down. I talk too much and they shut me down. But look, so there are all these policies that are happening, and so I think that can we do more? Yes, absolutely. Execution is always a challenge. I know that. So with all these ideas, we need to keep our eyes on the ball and make sure that we work with the right partners. We remain consistent, but just knowing that there is a goal and a path to follow.
Thank you so much. All right, we have to shut down. Maybe we'll take this offline, but I need to also understand policies that are being structured around the demand side of this equation, because in making local manufacturing of medicines work in our market, we have to also take care of the demand side. Everything I've heard, 99% are on the supply side, more production, access to finance and all of that for production. But how does the person who is sick in a local community be able to receive this medicine that is now lying in the pharmacy? Like I said, we're out of time, so we'll take that after this time. I want to especially thank everybody. We have in our midst this morning the facilitator of the Health Policy Commission of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, in the person of Dr. Maurice Atoki, who is also the CEO of ABC Health, just flew in and she will give us the closing remarks. Thank you, Dr. Maurice. Thank you, Dr. Atoki.
Thank you so very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure just really hearing very important topics this morning. First and foremost is to observe protocol and really appreciate all of you for being here, for spending this time with us to navigate this important topic on the readiness of local production. A lot of groups across the health value chain do talk about it, but really we were quite particular about asking ourselves whether Nigeria as a country is indeed ready across the nuances of our local production capacity. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, captains of industries, as we bring this session to a close this morning, I would first of all like to extend my gratitude to Mrs. Faladi for skillfully setting the stage for today's insightful discussion. Of course, I also wish to thank the distinguished panelists, and I must apologize for my voice. It's horrible. I picked something last week in Abuja. Mr. Raphael Ajayi, thank you so much for your profound contributions. Dr. Abiodun Yeluga, Mr. Chukudi Uche, Mr. Kende Otto, Mrs. Mary Ame, thank you all so very much. And of course, most distinguishedly, our expert discussant this morning, Dr. Abdul Mukhtar, for your persistent and very engaging contributions, and also bringing us up to speed on what the government is all about as far as payback is concerned. Today's discussion indeed has been both engaging and thought-provoking, addressing the challenges, the opportunities and strategies necessary to enhance local medicine production and improve supply chain efficiency. We have explored the complexities of the pharmaceutical supply chain, touching on regulatory barriers, production costs, procurement inefficiencies, and the importance of strengthening governance frameworks. The perspectives shared this morning in this session have underscored the crucial role for collaboration amongst government, the private sector, and international stakeholders in building a more resilient and sustaining pharmaceutical industry that is capable of meeting the healthcare demands and needs of our population. It is our hope that the actionable policy recommendations, the very insightful contributions, and the strategic insights generated here today will inform us further ongoing reforms and investments that are aimed to strengthen supply chains and boost local manufacturing capacity. On behalf of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group Health Policy Commission, I would like once again to thank all of you for your participation. We also must apologize we couldn't take questions, and I encourage you to continue engaging on these important topics, as together we can ensure that Nigeria's pharmaceutical industry reaches its full potential in delivering affordable, high-quality medicines for every Nigerian and beyond. Thank you once again. For those continuing with the summit, we wish you productive deliberations, and for those who are concluding with this session, we wish you safe travels and a very pleasant day ahead. May God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and may God bless you all.
There will be a little breakfast for those who attended the productive session outside.